Old Grognard says, let's look at how movement during combat works in 2nd edition AD&D. Hello and welcome. The idea for today's video came from a comment a while back where a viewer asked if I could do a video on how combat movement works in 2nd edition AD&D. I figure that if one person is asking, then there's a good chance other folks are wanting to ask the same question and just haven't gotten around to it. This is also the first video I'm going to attempt to record with my condensing microphone. I've had it for a while but haven't had a place to set it up, so this will be interesting. If there's a difference in sound quality over my previous videos, good or bad, I'd really like to know, so let me know in the comments. A basic concept to get familiar with when looking at movement in 2nd edition is that how far you move dictates what you can do for your action. As a general rule, the farther you move, the less you can do. You also have to understand that generally speaking, your action structure is move, then action, and then once you do your action, that ends your turn. The material I'm referencing for today's video is on pages 96 and 97 of the Player's Handbook. It's titled Movement in Combat. To get us started, I'm going to read some of it and then work from there. Since a round is roughly a minute long, it should be easy for a character to move just about anywhere he wants during the course of the round. After all, Olympic-class sprinters can cover vast amount of ground in a minute. However, a character in an AD&D game is not an Olympic sprinter running in a straight line. He is trying to maneuver through a battle without getting killed. He is keeping his eyes open for trouble, avoiding surprise, watching his back, watching the backs of his partners, and looking for a good opening, while simultaneously planning his next move, sometimes through a haze of pain. He may be carrying a load of equipment that slows him down significantly. Because of all these things, the distance a character can move is significantly less than the players generally think. In a combat round, a being can move up to 10 times its movement rating, in feet. Thus, if a character has a movement rating of 9, he can move up to 90 feet in a round. However, the types of moves a character can make during combat are somewhat limited. Now that we understand a bit of the design philosophy behind how movement is structured, let's look at how movement works in common situations that come up in combat. Those are going to be closing for melee, moving while engaging in missile fire, charging at an opponent, and breaking contact or retreating, whether that's going to be a cautious retreat or just all-out fleeing. Let's get started. The first thing we're going to look at is the section titled Movement in Melee. It covers closing distance to the enemy in order to engage in melee. The basic move is to get closer for combat, i.e., move close enough to an enemy to attack. This is neither a blind rush nor a casual stroll. Instead, the character approaches quickly but with caution. When closing for combat, a character can move up to half his allowed distance and still make a melee attack. What this would look like for a human or other character with a movement rate of 12 is that they could move up to 60 feet or half of the allowed distance of 120 feet and still make a melee attack. If the character was a dwarf with a movement rate of 6, their allowed movement would be 60 feet per round, and so they would be able to move up to 30 feet and still attack. I know the rules as written say, and still make a melee attack as in singular, but if the character can make multiple melee attacks and I'm the DM, I'll let them do it. That's closing for melee. Let's look at how missile fire works under movement and missile combat. Rather than slug it out toe-to-toe with an opponent, a character can move up to 1/2 his normal movement rate and engage in missile fire at half his normal rate of fire. Thus, a man capable of moving 120 feet and armed with a longbow, 2 shots per round under normal circumstances, could move 60 feet and still fire 1 shot. The same man armed with a heavy crossbow, 1 shot every other round, would be able to shoot only once every 4 rounds while on the move. They pretty much explained all we need to know about how movement plus missile fire works right there in the description. I don't feel the need to clarify anything. A house rule I use to simplify this, however, is that if a weapon has a rate of fire of at least 1 per round, you can attack once or half your rate of fire rounded down, whichever works out better for you. If it has a slower rate of fire, like say a heavy crossbow or a firearm, you can attack once if it's loaded, and then to reload and resume firing, you have to stop moving. If you look at the arquebus from the PHB, this is pretty much how you would do it, rules as written anyway, since you can't reload an arquebus while moving. The next item is charging, and this one confuses a lot of folks. I'll try to break it down so it makes sense. A character can also charge a foe. A charge increases the character's movement rate by 50% and enables the character to make an attack at the end of his movement. A charging character also gains a +2 bonus to his attack roll, mainly from momentum. Certain weapons, such as a lance, inflict double the rolled damage in a charge. However, charging gives the opponent several advantages. First, they gain a -2 bonus to their initiative rolls. Second, charging characters gain no dexterity bonuses to armor class, and they suffer an AC penalty of 1. Finally, if the defender is using a spear or polearm weapon and sets it against the charge, bracing the butt against a stone or his foot, he inflicts double damage on a successful hit. When doing a charge, our movement rate goes up by 50%, so a character with a movement of 12 would have their allowed movement in combat of 120 feet per round, increased by 50% to 180 feet. In the rules, there's no minimum distance for a charge, but the downsides of charging are bad enough that I've never had a problem with a player trying to repeatedly do 5-foot charges or anything like that. The other thing that sometimes confuses folks is the initiative modifier for the defender. You have to remember that in this game, you declare actions and then roll initiative. In game terms, the bonus to defender initiative is to increase the chances of hitting the charger on their way in, so to speak. The rest of the rules for charging are fairly easy to understand, so let's look at the options we have when we want to retreat from melee. We have 2 options for this, withdrawing and fleeing. Let's start with withdrawing. When making a withdrawal, a character carefully backs away from his opponent, who can choose to follow. The character moves up to 1/3 his normal movement rate. If 2 characters are fighting a single opponent and one of them decides to withdraw, the remaining character can block the advance of the opponent. This is a useful method for getting a seriously injured man out of combat. The next item is fleeing, and this is where we see an early form of the attack of opportunity. Let's look at how this works. To flee from combat, a character simply turns and runs up to his full movement rate. However, the fleeing character drops his defenses and turns his back to his opponent. The enemy is allowed a free attack, or multiple attacks if the creature has several attacks per round, at the rear of the fleeing character. This attack is made the instant the character flees. It doesn't count against the number of attacks the opponent is allowed during the round, and initiative is irrelevant. The fleeing character can be pursued unless a companion blocks the advance of the enemy. Those are the basic rules as written for movement in combat. If you're used to playing, let's call it 21st century D&D, what you're allowed to do in one round in 2nd edition may seem somewhat limited. So we could say that the con of this system is that you don't get to do as much when it's your turn. The upside of this, however, is that since each turn is resolved faster, you don't have to wait as long between turns. Whether or not this is worth it is ultimately up to you to decide for yourself. If you got anything out of this video, please leave a like. If you know someone else who might get something out of this video, please share. If you have any questions or cool stories, as always, feel free to leave them in the comments. Thanks for watching. Master of Arms and I would like to wish you a wonderful rest of your day.